The sky over Michigan was clear that afternoon, the kind of summer day that made you forget Earth was just one rock among trillions. Linda Tucker stood at her backyard grill, flipping ribs like a woman with no enemies. Her old boombox, duct-taped and sun-faded, blasted Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer, and her apron read, "Kiss the cook or leave hungry." Her husband, Carl, a retired Navy man with a busted knee and an endless list of dad jokes, sipped sweet tea in a lawn chair while their grandkids tossed water balloons at each other. A bald eagle flew overhead, because of course it did. 2 miles away, buried under layers of concrete and paranoia, the Michigan training base monitored irregular heat signatures in Saturn's orbit. The staff, a mix of fresh-out-of-boot camp kids and crusty officers with caffeine addictions, flagged the anomaly. Something about the signals felt wrong, too precise, too cold. Before they could alert command, the screens turned red, then white. At 2:41 p.m., a high-velocity plasma lance from a Galactic-class Imperial drone streaked through the upper atmosphere, targeting what it believed was a rogue insurgent node. Its targeting algorithm had confused Linda's grill smoke, and several iPhones clustered together for a thermal relay array. It struck with surgical precision. The blast radius was small by alien standards. To humans, it was an unthinkable violation. Linda Tucker died instantly. The spatula she was holding was later recovered 3 blocks away, melted around the handle. Her stereo played 2 more verses before the batteries gave out. The death toll was 10, all civilians. Among the wreckage, a tipped-over cooler, an Eagles flag, and the scent of charred barbecue. For Earth, it was a tragedy. For the Galactic Empire, it didn't even register a footnote. 2 days later, at Joint Command North in Colorado, General Hank Bulldog McAllister stared at the report through bloodshot eyes. The file sat untouched on his desk for 12 hours. Not because he didn't care. He'd read it 5 times, but because he couldn't figure out how to respond in a way that didn't involve flipping the table and punching something through the wall. Hank was old-school military, crew-cut, coffee addiction, and a gravelly voice shaped by decades of barking at recruits and yelling at malfunctioning printers. He'd spent his youth on the front lines of Earth's conflicts and his twilight years trying to keep Earth out of galactic ones. He finally stood up, put on his faded varsity jacket, U.S. Naval Academy, class of '89, and marched into the war room. There was no ceremony, just the scuff of his boots and the low hum of tired analysts pretending they hadn't been tracking the same satellite loop for 10 hours straight. "Which bastard fired the shot?" he asked without preamble. Lieutenant Cora Simmons tapped a key. A holographic interface burst to life, displaying a sleek alien vessel shaped like a scythe. Ship ID confirms its Empire built. No rebel signals, no smuggling tags. This was a clean-up standard sweep pattern. They hit us like we were insurgents. Do they know who they hit? Hank's voice didn't rise, but it got colder. Doubt it, sir. They think Earth's outer installations are expendable. They probably assumed we'd ignore it. Or send a letter. Hank leaned closer to the screen, narrowing his eyes at the ship. She was a civilian. Yes, sir. Linda Tucker, 52, retired high school teacher. 2 sons in the military. Made a hell of a peach cobbler, apparently. Hank didn't blink. They didn't just hit Earth. They hit asterisk our woman dot asterisk. It wasn't just a line. It was a declaration. And across the room, the analyst felt it. No matter how distant or foreign this war was, Linda made it real. She could have been anyone's mother, sister, aunt. She asterisk was asterisk someone's everything. And now she was gone, reduced to smoke and silence because an alien machine misread a summer afternoon. "Get me a line to the Empire's diplomatic corps," Hank said, already halfway out the door. "We're not asking questions. We're giving warnings." 6 hours later, aboard the pristine hulls of the Galactic Embassy ship orbiting Earth's moon, Ambassador Creel of the Fifth Flame waited in a chamber scented with calming spores and polished to such a shine he could see his own scales. Creel, like most Empire envoys, believed humans were a chaotic but ultimately harmless species. Loud, uncultured, a bit obsessed with fire and sugar, but not a threat. Not to them. The door hissed open, and in strode General McAllister, flanked by 2 Marines who looked like they ate raw iron for breakfast. Hank's uniform was clean, but his demeanor wasn't. He moved like a man who'd been forced to attend a funeral, and then told to apologize for the corpse. Creel stood, General, a pleasure. You attacked our woman. Creel blinked. I beg your pardon. Hank stepped forward, voice low but deadly. You fired on Earth soil. Killed 10 people. One of them was Linda Tucker. She wasn't armed. She wasn't even aware of your war. She was flipping ribs on a goddamn grill. Regrettable, but collateral damage is statistically unavoidable in interplanetary conflict zones, Creel said with mechanical diplomacy. If you'd like to file for reparations, the Empire has a system. You think we're asking for money? Hank spat. You lit a match in our backyard and expected us to sit around debating forms? She was a citizen, a mother, a cook. You hit the wrong damn planet. Creel tried to smile, a gesture that on his face looked like someone peeling an orange with their eyelids. We did not intend offense. Earth has not declared sovereignty over the Saturn colonies. The action was tactical, not personal. It's personal now. The silence stretched. Creel glanced at the Marines. They didn't move. They looked like statues with death behind their eyes. I will inform my superiors, Creel said carefully. I assure you, this was not sanctioned at the highest levels. Likely a rogue captain. An automated error. Surely Earth does not wish to escalate over one civilian. Hank's voice dropped an octave. 1? You think 1 is a number we ignore? You haven't figured out who we are yet, have you? The general stepped forward, nose to nose with the alien. You ever heard the phrase, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned? Imagine what fury looks like when an entire species gets scorned. We're not diplomats. We're not philosophers. We're the folks who invented monster trucks, deep-fried Oreos, and reality television. We may not always get along with each other, but you bane one of ours, and you get asterisk or asterisk of us. He turned to leave, but paused. We're not asking for a name. We're giving you a countdown. You've got 72 hours to hand over whoever gave that order. After that, don't expect a barbecue. Expect fire. By the time Hank was back aboard his shuttle, the internet had already erupted. #Justice for Linda was trending. A TikTok of her flipping ribs to Eye of the Tiger had gone viral. Tributes poured in from every continent. Veterans held candlelight vigils. Country singers wrote ballads. And somewhere in space, a nervous alien captain realized his name was probably going to be at the top of Earth's new hit list. Back on Earth, Hank walked into his quarters, sat down with a grunt, and looked at the old photo on his desk. Linda Tucker standing between 2 tanks, holding a pie, her smile bigger than both machines. She'd once brought lunch to the base after he'd chewed out her son, told Hank to eat before yelling again. He'd respected her ever since. He picked up the photo, held it steady, and whispered, We're coming for you, Linda, one way or another. He took a sip of stale coffee, eyes narrowing toward the stars, and muttered, You attacked our woman. Now it's war. The Galactic Embassy hovered in high orbit, shaped like a rotating crescent and covered in sleek panels that shimmered against Earth's crude, radio-clogged atmosphere. Inside, everything was too polished, too quiet, like a museum for species that thought emotions were contagious. It smelled faintly of sterilized moss and cold ambition. Ambassador Creel paced slowly across the central hall, each step carefully measured for impression. He had already delivered his report to the Empire's central conduit, framing the incident as an unfortunate misfire, a localized human overreaction, a footnote. He expected some diplomatic friction, perhaps a trade freeze, maybe a protest. What he got instead was General Hank McAllister's voice echoing across the solar system with enough force to crack atmospheres. The humans weren't just angry. They were preparing. General McAllister didn't sleep that night. He sat in the command center of joint operations, eyes locked on 10 screens, each one pulling feed from different systems. Troop mobilization, satellite reckon, Empire communications, civilian chatter. On one screen, Linda Tucker's picture kept rotating through Memorial Loop, her smiling beside a bowl of chili, clinking beers at a 4th of July picnic, hugging her soldier son outside Fort Bragg. What started as grief had calcified into resolve. He dragged his fingers through his hair and tapped the receiver. Lieutenant Simmons. Her voice crackled through. So, pull all surveillance logs from the last 72 hours. Prioritize any vessel matching Empire sweep-class patrols. Find me the one that fired. Yes, sir. We're triangulating based on ion trails and thermal distortions in the upper Saturn range. It's messy, but we're narrowing it. Mess is fine. I don't need the crime scene. I need the face. The call ended. McAllister leaned back and stared at the flickering lights overhead. His ribs ached, an old fracture from Kandahar. His mind was moving fast, maybe too fast. This wasn't just about retaliation anymore. It was about precedent. If the Empire believed it could hit Earth soil and get away with a press release, the floodgates would open. Linda was the match. Now the fuse was lit. Elsewhere, buried beneath Nebraska in a concrete labyrinth older than most nations, a group of specialists huddled around a tactical table. They were soldiers, engineers, analysts, one of them chewing bubblegum louder than was necessary. At the center stood Commander Avery Juno, Special Reckon. She was mid-30s, sharp-eyed, wore her hair in a no-nonsense buzz cut. She'd grown up under Linda Tucker's guidance, literally. Linda had taught her sixth-grade algebra and once patched up her split lip after a playground fight. Juno pointed at a red-marked zone on the map. They hit us from a clean orbit arc. That means stealth configuration. Empire issue. 3 possible classes could have done it, but only one's been seen scouting Saturn this week. X-9 Gorgon. Small crew, high payload. Retaliation, Astatech. Eventually, but first we take their eyes and ears. Orders were transmitted. Across multiple Earth outposts, human forces shifted from passive to active mode. No more observation. They began jamming probes, scattering signal clouds, disorienting satellite paths. Earth didn't have the luxury of firing first, but they could blind the enemy, and sometimes that was enough. On the Empire's side, discomfort grew like a fever. Ambassador Creel received his 3rd encrypted warning in one day. The Central Conduit's tone had changed. They'd reviewed McAllister's speech. They were alarmed, not because of the content. Threats were common, but because of the delivery. Hank hadn't blustered. He hadn't begged. He had spoken like a man who wasn't bluffing, like someone who knew exactly what the cost of war was and intended to pay it in full. Creel scheduled another diplomatic session, this time inside the Earth-Moon Transfer Terminal, a neutral zone wrapped in steel and neutrality clauses. Hank showed up late, dragging his knuckles across a metal briefcase and carrying a thermos with a cracked World's Best Grandpa sticker. He didn't sit. Creel began politely, trying to guide the conversation with protocol. Hank derailed it within 5 words. "You tracked down the shooter yet?" Creel blinked slowly. "General, I'm afraid your interpretation of events continues to frame this as intentional. But our investigation suggests a standard orbital scan misregistered heat patterns. We deeply regret the loss, but no Empire captain would deliberately target civilians." Hank unscrewed the thermos lid. The scent of burned diner coffee flooded the room like chemical warfare. "You ever burn toast?" What?" "Toast. Bread. You leave it in too long. You ruin it. You scrape the burnt part off, but it never tastes the same. That's what your apology is. Scrape toast." Creel's nostrils flared slightly, a sign of rising discomfort. "You must understand, General, we have no reason to provoke Earth. Your species is known for unpredictable conflict behavior, but we respect your sovereignty. Respect without consequences means nothing. We are still determining who authorized the scan. Our logs are undergoing verification. Perhaps this was a rogue element." "There's no rogue. There's only you, and every hour you stole makes it worse." Hank stood fully upright, towering over the table. "Here's the new timeline. 48 hours. You find the name. You deliver the name. Or I start giving names to people who know how to turn duct tape and fertilizer into art projects. You're escalating beyond reason." "No, I'm escalating to match yours." Outside the station, Earth's orbit traffic had shifted. Civilian flights were being rerouted. Military craft had tripled. Defense satellites blinked online like fireflies with a grudge. McAllister wasn't waiting for permission anymore. He was building momentum. Creel returned to his quarters feeling something close to unease. Not fear. Not yet. But unease. Humans weren't supposed to have this kind of leverage. Their weapons were crude. Their ships were loud. Their culture was erratic. But something about their emotional resilience, about their refusal to classify tragedy as acceptable loss, defied everything the Empire believed. Back at Joint Command, Juno stood over a table of flickering holograms, pointing at new data. "We've got a name. Captain Varnak of the 9th Precision Sweep Unit. Records show he authorized a Saturnic low-orbit purge less than 10 minutes before the incident." Hank leaned in, jaw clenched. "Where is he now?" "Empire freighter heading toward the car systems. Fast. He knows he screwed up." Hank didn't wait. He turned to Simmons. "Issue a formal demand to Creel. I want that bastard in cuffs by sundown. If not, we intercept the ship. I don't care what flags it's flying." Simmons hesitated. "That'll cross into Empire-controlled zones." "I'm aware. If we engage there, we risk full war." Hank's voice went cold. Linda didn't get a warning. By nightfall, Earth's fleet had repositioned. Not into attack formation, but not far off. War wasn't official, but it had become inevitable. The final line wasn't crossed. Not yet, but the toes were hanging over the edge. McAllister stood once more in his quarters, watching old footage of Linda from a family reunion. She was dancing with her granddaughter, laughing with a kind of joy that no battlefield had ever known. He didn't cry. He never cried. But his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his thermos. A soft knock came at the door. Juno entered, carrying a slim dossier. "We sent the official ultimatum. And Creel requested another meeting. Says he wants to offer alternatives." Hank didn't look at her. "Then we let him talk, while we keep loading." She nodded once and left. The general finally sat down, staring into the flickering light. His bones were heavy, his thoughts heavier. Earth had always been the underdog in this galactic mess, but it had something the Empire would never understand. Grit, spite, an unshakable need to answer fire with fury. Not out of policy, but out of principle. He looked out into the black beyond, narrowed his eyes, and whispered, "You fired the first shot. Now watch what happens when we return it with interest." Somewhere beyond Neptune, aboard the Empire freighter ***, Captain Varnak paced with the erratic tension of a man who knew the net was closing. The cabin lights flickered in tune with his nose. He'd received the transmission 3 hours ago, Earth demanding his surrender. His commanding officer hadn't responded with instructions, only a terse message. * remain silent. Stay mobile. ***, that was Empire code for * you're on your own now, star. Which didn't surprise him. Varnak had served long enough to know the Empire only stood behind its soldiers when it was politically convenient. Civilians had died. Human civilians. One of them, for reasons unknown to him, had become the emotional detonator of an entire planet's wrath. He hadn't fired the plasma strike personally. It had been an automated engagement sequence. Still, his name was stamped on the authorization log, and now it echoed through every Earth system like a ghost verdict. Varnak, guilty. On Earth, General Hank McAllister didn't bother hiding his satisfaction. The name was out. The proof was solid. He had what he needed. But Earth's request for extradition had gone unanswered, and Varnak's ship was slipping toward Empire-protected territory. Time was the last luxury Hank had left. He needed someone who could retrieve the captain before diplomacy gutted their momentum. Someone not bound by neat rules or hesitant morals. Someone who owed Linda Tucker something more than words. He made one call. It wasn't routed through official channels. It wasn't tracked. When the encrypted signal hit a dormant relay in Arizona, a single light came on in a workshop surrounded by rusted motorcycles and propane tanks. Bobby Joe McCracken wiped grease off his hands and grinned. The team assembled within hours. Not in a boardroom, not on a base, but in a former roller rink in Detroit that had been repurposed into a government black ops staging point since the mid-2000s. It had a broken jukebox and smelled like gasoline dreams. They called themselves a Detroit Dirty Dozen, even though there were only 7 of them left. Veterans, misfits, and maniacs. Each one carried a file that would give a normal psychological analyst a nervous breakdown. There was Tamika Johnson, a former waitress and Olympic-level sharpshooter who swore by her twin Desert Eagles and still wore pink nail polish into firefights. There was Pops Ramirez, a Vietnam-era hacker with a prosthetic arm built from salvage parts and filled with micro-tools. There was Frankie Wires-Lau, a soft-spoken explosives expert who never raised his voice, even when detonating half a building. And then there was Bobby Joe, explosive temperament, zero impulse control, and a brain wired for chaos. He wore an old LYNYRD t-shirt over tactical armor and spoke in tangents that somehow always ended in actionable strategy. Hank briefed them quickly. No frills. The objective: intercept and extract Varnak before he reached car systems. Officially, Earth would deny everything. Unofficially, they were cleared for full autonomy. They launched from an unregistered stealth carrier. No call signs. No affiliations. Just a 7-person warhead of attitude and experience. The Dirty Dozen caught up to *Desfera* near the edge of the Titan Drift, a lawless stretch where even Empire Patrol flew blind. Bobby Joe patched into the ship's signal through a mod Game Boy Advance. Their insertion was ungraceful. Tamika crash-landed them through a maintenance bay and declared, "We knocked." Within seconds, the freighter was swarming with confused, terrified Empire crew, none of whom were prepared to handle human boarding tactics that included smoke bombs made from barbecue sauce and blaring Van Halen as a distraction. Pops sealed doors with chewing gum and a plasma torch. Frankie laid down enough traps to make the ship's security AI glitch. Varnak tried to run. He didn't get far. Tamika tackled him in the engine corridor and had him zip-tied before he could beg for diplomatic immunity. She didn't say a word, just leaned in and whispered, "You know what Linda did every Sunday? She brought hot wings to the VFW. You killed kindness." They extracted him through the same hole they came in, left a handwritten note in his cabin. Asterisk next time. Read your targets better. Asterisk. The return trip was silent. Varnak didn't resist. He didn't speak. Not until he was placed in a holding chamber at the North Atlantic Detention Hub, where General McAllister waited behind a reinforced glass wall. Hank didn't look smug. He looked tired, like a man who'd finally dragged a corpse out of the river only to realize there were more upstream. Varnak cleared his throat. "You won't kill me." "Didn't plan to." "The Empire will retaliate." "Let him." Varnak leaned forward. "She was no one. I didn't know. It wasn't personal." Hank looked at him through the glass. "Exactly. And that's your problem." Across the planet, the story erupted. Footage of the capture leaked within hours. Earth's news anchors salivated. Linda's photo reappeared on screens everywhere, this time next to headlines like *Justice flies with a barbecue fork *, and * they came for one. Earth sent a crazy 1 star. The Dirty Dozen became folk heroes overnight. Tamika's line about hot wings went viral. Hashtags bloomed. Tribute videos flooded social channels, half patriotic, half completely unhinged. One showed Linda's face photoshopped onto Rambo's body, wielding a flaming grill. Another remix of final moments to the tune of Sweet Child O' Mine. Hank didn't engage. He wasn't after hero worship. He wanted a signal. One that would echo into the deep corners of the galaxy where ambassadors never tread and where rules were suggestions. A signal that said, humanity doesn't forget. Humanity doesn't care how advanced your weapons are. If you strike a human and call it unfortunate, you've just bought a lifetime subscription to consequences. At Empire Command, panic rippled. The diplomatic corps hadn't anticipated that Earth could reach so far, so fast, with so few. Empire captains began refusing to patrol Earth's orbit. Rumors spread that Earth had an elite corps of barbecue death squads who fought with music and nostalgia. These were jokes, mostly, but fear doesn't need truth, it just needs repetition. On Earth, Hank gathered his team one final time. He didn't hand out medals. He handed out beers and sat with them at a folding table in a dimly lit hangar. No speeches, no press, just silence, the occasional laugh, and the hum of a radio playing CCR. Tamika finally broke the quiet. "You think they'll try again?" Hank looked at the ceiling. "If they do, we'll remind them who invented spite." Pops raised his beer. "To Linda." They clinked cans, drank, and let the quiet roll back in. That night, from an orbiting Empire station, Ambassador Creel sent one final message to his superiors. It read, "Recommend ceasefire. Humans do not de-escalate. They amplify. And somewhere in the vast quiet between stars, where algorithms predict wars and civilizations rise on policy, a single truth began to settle uncomfortably in the hearts of those who once looked at Earth as a backwater species of chaotic anomalies. They had made a mistake, not because they killed a soldier, not because they violated a treaty, but because they struck down someone who mattered to the wrong people. And the wrong people, it turned out, were exactly the kind of people who didn't stop until everything burned or bent. The war hadn't started yet, but the warm-up was over, and the entire galaxy had just been introduced to the human definition of payback. Linda Tucker was never meant to be known beyond her block. She wasn't a general, wasn't a politician, didn't command fleets or write policies. She cooked, she taught, she hugged hard and forgave easily. But when Earth Defense Archives opened her full background file, sealed for nearly a decade, the truth painted a different picture. Linda Tucker, born Linda Ellison, had once served under a program that no longer existed in public records. Deep insertion, asymmetric warfare, cultural infiltration. A classified operative, trained not just to fight, but to teach others how to fight better, cleaner, smarter. She'd walked through war zones with a pie in one hand and intelligence in the other, and never once asked for recognition. The woman who baked cookies for her neighborhood watched also dismantled an arms cartel in Bosnia using only surveillance drones and a network of sympathetic widows. She had retired without ceremony, built a normal life brick by brick, and was erased from the war rolls like a faded nameplate. That detail changed everything. Her death hadn't just struck a nerve. It had severed a spinal cord. The general knew it now wasn't simply grief that had ignited Earth's fury. It was a sudden, horrifying realization that someone who had done everything right, someone who had given quietly and faded out honorably, could still be vaporized with bureaucratic indifference. The Empire had not killed a symbol. They had made one. In the council chambers of the intergalactic peace bloc, whispers became shouts. Non-aligned species requested emergency updates on Earth's retaliatory capabilities. Several border planets sent encoded messages requesting alliance talks. The galaxy had watched humans break protocol by extracting an enemy officer mid-transit, had seen Earth's so-called primitive commandos pull off a mission that even the Empire's elite infiltration units considered impossible. Now they were watching humans grieve through action, mourn with momentum. They didn't wait for funerals. They made statements. Creel, though still the Empire's official representative, found his influence thinning. His most recent communique to the Central Conduit had included phrases like unprecedented psychological projection and rapid mimetic escalation. He attempted to reassure the Council that Earth was still bound by logic. His efforts were undercut by a now viral transmission where a young Earth soldier explained on a comedy podcast, while dressed as a hot dog, that revenge is our second favorite sport after football. Creel's colleagues began to doubt his analysis. At Joint Command, General McAllister stood with his hand behind his back as Juno briefed him on incoming intelligence. Several unaligned planets had relayed patterns of unrest within the Empire's outer colonies. Small protests, slogans scrawled on walls. Linda lives in over 60 dialects. Civilians from mining moons and agriplanets were repeating it without knowing who she was. They just knew someone was killed, and the killers were scared now. Rebellion didn't need weapons. Sometimes it started with stories. The Empire issued a statement denouncing Earth's actions. They called the capture of Varnak a criminal violation, a breach of peace, a hostile move from an immature world. The message concluded with the phrase disciplinary consequences. The next morning, Earth's reply was broadcast not as a document but as a 10-minute video montage, Linda laughing with her family, cooking with veterans, dancing at her son's wedding, cut against footage of Earth's forces drilling under a sky streaked with fighter trails. The soundtrack was a live version of Springsteen's Born to Run. No narration, no commentary, just the implicit promise that Earth didn't forget. The whole galaxy watched. Billions didn't fully understand the cultural cues, the symbolism, the tone, but they understood power. They understood defiance. And they understood that Earth didn't mourn quietly. Varnak, now a prisoner, had been moved to an undisclosed site. Interrogation wasn't necessary. Earth already had everything they needed. He was offered no abuse, no torture, no grand show of vengeance. They fed him standard rations, let him pace, and gave him nothing to argue against. That silence became the punishment. He watched the news from a secure feed. saw his own face clipped next to headlines of memorial parades and commemorative murals. He wasn't treated like an enemy. He was treated like a trigger, an accident that had opened the door to a war his people didn't want and couldn't afford. Alone in his cell, he began to realize that the Empire hadn't abandoned him for protocol. They had abandoned him for convenience. He wasn't a scapegoat. He was a ghost in waiting. Hank understood this better than most. He didn't care about Varnak's fate. That decision would come later. What mattered now was what the Empire did next. Earth had shown its hand, resolve, reach, reaction. The Empire could escalate, but every analyst knew it wouldn't be clean. Earth wasn't a planet that could be neatly occupied or pacified. Too many cultures, too much dissonance, too little predictability. Their warfare wasn't elegant. It was explosive. And they had a new doctrine now. One civilian equals one campaign. A final message was prepared by Joint Command. Hank reviewed it once. It wasn't boastful. It wasn't even angry. It simply outlined a timeline of events, beginning with the unauthorized strike and ending with the capture of the responsible officer. It included Linda's full declassified record, her service, her retirement, her final moments. It made no threats. It listed no demands. It concluded with a single phrase, "We remember ours." That message spread further than the general anticipated. Within days, small memorials appeared in parts of the galaxy where humans had never set foot. One on the orbital ring of a water-world colony, another carved into the rusted metal of a forgotten transport station. In every language, the same idea repeated. Some names shouldn't vanish. The Empire's internal reports grew anxious. Discontent was being seeded not through military conquest, but through mourning. Earth wasn't winning through strength. It was winning through story. And worse, it wasn't even trying. Every move was reactive, every retaliation framed as justified, proportionate, precise. That infuriated the Empire's central core. They'd built their dominance on narratives of order versus chaos. But Earth was becoming a mirror they couldn't crack, showing them not chaos, but clarity. What happens when empathy gets armor? In a private meeting with the Terran Assembly, Hank stood before the gathered advisors and said the part no one else wanted to say. This isn't just about Linda. It's not even about Varnak. It's about the lie we all accepted. That some lives are too small to matter. That if you don't wear the right badge or hold the right title, you're just background. But Linda was the kind of person this world was built on. You take her away, you take a piece of all of us. No one interrupted. Even the coldest politicians couldn't find a retort. We don't need war to prove that, Hank continued. We just need them to know we'll never go quiet again. In the galactic political sphere, Earth's name changed shape. From unpredictable nuisance to cultural power. The notion that humans were fractured and incoherent gave way to a new, terrifying theory. Maybe they were incoherent until something unified them. And now, they had unity through loss. Linda's son, Corporal Travis Tucker, was rotated off duty after the capture. He declined interviews, declined promotion. He only asked to speak at the memorial service. Standing at a small podium before 300 mourners and 5 million livestream viewers, he spoke simply. My mom wasn't special because of what she did in war. She was special because she never made war the center of her life. She taught me how to forgive, how to grill, how to apologize when you screw up. She didn't want to be a hero. She wanted people to show up for each other. Then he looked into the camera. I'm asking the Empire to do what my mom would have done. Show up. Admit the mistake. Make it right. We don't need a war. But if that's what you choose, understand we're not fighting for pride. We're fighting because we loved her. And if you think that kind of love stops with a blast, you haven't understood a damn thing about humans. The service ended with silence. No anthem. No gun salute. Just a crackling audio of an old home video where Linda told a joke so bad it made her whole family groan. The laughter carried farther than any broadcast. From the edge of Empire space, a signal was sent. Not a declaration. Not a threat. Just coordinates. A place where peace talks could begin, if Earth was still willing. No guarantees. Just an opening. Hank reviewed it in private. He said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached for his thermos, filled it again with that same bitter, burned diner coffee, and looked up toward the stars. If the Empire was finally ready to listen, maybe Earth would answer. But if they weren't, then the next phase wouldn't be a warning. It would be a response.